Good evening. I'm Anne-Marie Heizmann. I'm running for the 131st Assembly seat in upstate New York. I've been asked by your organization to answer a few questions about my feelings in relation to law enforcement. My campaign manager is here. He is going to ask me the questions to make sure that I stay on track. So we'll let Bobby go ahead and ask the first one.
Due to the current situation in our country, the biggest question is how you will support law enforcement if you are elected.
Okay, well, I think the most important thing to know is that I come from a law enforcement family. My grandfather is a police officer. He walked a beat in Chickasha, Oklahoma. I have multiple cousins that are police officers now. I have a cousin who is a trooper out of the Elbridge barracks at this point. And if you go onto my assembly page, you can actually see him talking with a young child on a bicycle during the protest down in Syracuse last week. I'm very proud of my family and the work that they do. I understand their challenges, and I will work very hard to make sure that the needs of all of the officers are taken care of.
Your thoughts on defunding law enforcement?
Yeah, that's a little bit on the ridiculous side. The idea of defunding the police is just going to lead to instability, an increase in crime. It would be absolutely horrendous.
What changes do you feel need to be made, if any?
If any, and I really, at this point, I feel that with everything going on, for me to know the answer to this, truthfully, I would need to talk with my family members who are police officers and see what they feel. The only thing that my campaign manager and I talked about was the possibility of expanded training for de-escalation in non-life-threatening situations. Obviously, in a life-threatening situation, the officer has to protect themselves and the community first. But like I said, I would really defer to the members of my family and I have a lot of friends that are in law enforcement, and unfortunately, with the current COVID situation, you can't go talk with people as much as you could, though we're able to get out now. So I'm hoping I'll have a family get together soon, and I can actually ask those questions and see how they feel about it.
We currently have school resource officers in each school district. Due to the temporary shutdown and school district budgets, some districts will not be able to afford to have a school resource officer this coming school year, and possibly many school years to come. Do you think school resource officers are an important part of the school community?
Okay. School resource officers are extremely important to the school community. I am old enough to remember back when New York State actually helped fund the school resource officers, which was a budget line that got cut quite a few years ago. And I think that was a huge mistake at that point. One of my cousins, who was the commander of a state trooper barracks, when he retired, he took the position as the school resource officer in the Jordan Elbridge district. Back when I was still the technology coordinator for the York Central School District, their school resource officer had his office next to mine. And I can tell you the ability for him to do community policing and build those relationships with the students was so beneficial that it's even hard to describe the level of benefit that it gave to the students and to the community to have him there, and the number of things that he was able to work on and actually stop things before they happened because students trusted him and came and talked to him, and then he was able to go to the students where there were issues and work with them, to prevent things from happening. School resource officers are something that is so needed, and it's one of those places where it's money well spent and the money should be going there.
What will you do to help districts maintain the school resource office program in their schools?
I will advocate like heck for it. I will do anything I can to help get the funding to them. I would certainly try to get it back into the state budget. That is something I think that really should be being paid for, by the state. We need to have those officers in every district, and they should be fully funded.
Before you even get into office, there will be a vote on the Civil Rights Law Section 50A that would open an officer's personal records to the public, including the address and any disciplinary actions taken against them. Do you agree with allowing this? And since this has already occurred, I'm going to hit the follow-up. So,
Yeah.
if this is passed, what will you do to support law enforcement to help protect them and their families?
Yeah, this is an absolutely horrible law, and I know that unfortunately they did repeal 50A, and now all that information is public. This is terrifying. I know my cousin, the same one who's a school resource officer now, back when he became a trooper, he actually put his house into his wife's maiden name so that he couldn't be traced because he was worried about it back then, and this was 30 years ago. For them to now know that that information is out there and anybody can find it so easily is absolutely horrible. It's just a recipe for disaster. I certainly will do everything I can to either get 50A reinstated or to get legislation that's even stronger and protects our officers and their families more instated.
Thoughts on bail reform? Supporting facts, if you are for or against it. I know where you are. That's why I kind of laughed when we asked the question. And what actions will you take to repeal or fix it?
Okay, well, we'll just start out. I'm totally against the bail reform and the discovery issues. While I do understand the issues that caused it, with some people being incarcerated for long periods of time, bail reform was not what was needed for that. And unfortunately, instead of correcting an issue where we maybe had a couple of judges that were keeping people in jail for too long when they couldn't pay bail on small offenses, we made it Christmas for criminals, and now it doesn't matter what you do, it's catch and release and you're out on the street again. I know there were some small reforms in the state budget, but they were so small they really don't count for anything. This is an absolutely horrible idea that they came up with. It needs to be fully repealed. It has gotten to the point now where police officers, when you get to the discovery side of it, can't even do their jobs because they're sitting in the office doing all this paperwork that's required, and in the meantime, the victims have lost all of their rights. This was the worst thought up thing that they ever came up with in Albany, I think. It's got to be repealed, and we have to try to undo the damage that's been caused by it.
Your stance on Second Amendment rights and the current gun laws in our area?
Well, and here's another. I am completely against the SAFE Act. I believe in the Second Amendment. As I tell everyone, first of all, I come from a law enforcement family. So I grew up handling guns. We always had, guns in our homes, and guns were for protection along with hunting and just target shooting. My grandfather loved to target shoot. I used to target shoot. I've always been around them. I now have a farm or I have a coyote problem. I prefer to use an AR-15 if I need to go out and defend some of my livestock. I am a 130-pound woman. It is a weapon that I can control, and I can get a few shots safely to where they need to go. You compare that with like a bolt action or a pump where the recoil is too much for me to handle. I might get one shot off, but I'm not going to get those, the second or third one that you need when you have, 2 or 3 coyotes attacking your livestock. So to me, it was absolutely, it's a crazy bill because to me, it is the ultimate war on women. You're taking away the semi-automatic weapons that women can use to defend themselves, and what you're doing is leaving the weapons that only people that have the stronger, broader shoulders can use. It's not at all a good situation, and it's not right. I certainly think that our Second Amendment rights should not be infringed like this, and I will do everything I can to try to repeal the SAFE Act.
Corrections officers are an important part of law enforcement. What are your thoughts on the current state of corrections officers' rights and work conditions?
Well, unfortunately, I have friends that are corrections officers, and I hear too much from them. To say the conditions suck, I think, would be even to put it, it's nowhere near strong enough to say it. The conditions that they have to work in are horrible. One of the things you have to think about, police officers have it tough enough out on the street. They have the ability to defend themselves. They have weapons. They can, unfortunately, I know their hands are getting a little bit tied in the current situation, but they can still defend themselves. A corrections officer, everyone they encounter is a criminal. Police officers at least encounter a lot of good people too. But once you're a corrections officer, those are the people that the police officers weren't the good people that they encountered. So unfortunately in a prison, I know they all say that they're innocent, but truthfully, most of them are not, and they are not good people. And these corrections officers are thrown in there and trying to take care of them day after day and trying to keep order. They're not allowed to defend themselves either with weapons or with their own, with their hands. If they get attacked and they get hurt, they get fired. That's ridiculous. I mean, corrections officers do not have to be worried that an inmate is going to attack them and they're going to lose their job and lose their livelihood. Especially if they've been working for years. Can you imagine? 15 years in and something like that happens and you lose your retirement. That's wrong. Absolutely is not the way it should be. And we definitely need to look at reforms in what the corrections officers are allowed to do and how they do their job so they can be safe while they're doing their jobs.
Well, you're kind of stating that already, but the follow-up was, what changes would you make, if any?
And the changes, we really need to make sure that the rules are changed so the corrections officers can defend themselves and that they can do what they need to do to stay safe in that situation.
Okay, finally, what do you feel that the Police Benevolent Association, especially Ontario County's Police PBA, need to understand why you are running for this position and why you deserve their vote?
Well, I think the reason really to consider voting for me, and you should vote for me, I shouldn't say consider, you definitely should be voting for me, is because I've spent the last 10 years working with the Seneca County Farm Bureau Board, the last 5 as president of the 10 I've been on the board, and I've been able to get things done in Albany. As a part-time volunteer, I've been able to go down there and have major influence on legislation from all different areas, from minimum wage to trucking regulations, to building codes. There's all sorts of things across the board that I've been able to get done. So that is the major reason to vote for me. Following that up with the fact that I come from a law enforcement family, I understand, what law enforcement families need, the law enforcement families want, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that the officers get what they need so they can take care of themselves and their families. I will always, always fight for their rights because, like I said, I am a member of a law enforcement family. I've grown up that way, and I want to make sure that they are taken care of. And let's see, to put it in a nutshell, I will back the blue. I always have, and I always will. So thank you. I hope you give me your endorsement. I hope you give me your vote. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Have a wonderful evening.